Good morning, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Before getting started, I have a question for you. How did you feel winning or playing the game just a few minutes ago? How did you feel? Excited? What else? Good? Awake? Cheerful? The winner doesn't talk, is too happy about that. How do you feel every morning when you go to work? The same? Okay, who doesn't feel the same? Please raise your hand. Oh, I see a few hands. That's exactly what I'm going to talk about today. So what I will try to share with you is a bit of the example of a company hire that I believe today is the most progressive, if you want, mature example of entrepreneurial and ecosystemic organization. And guess what? As human beings, we feel energized, we feel excited, we feel good when we can make a dent in the universe, when we can really contribute to our work and then to our life, since we spend most of our life working, at least if you're not rich enough to just travel the world and take a bit of sun. So very briefly about myself. My name is Emanuele Quintarelli, and my company is called Boundaryless. Boundaryless has really this idea of opening up the possibility to organize. Not organizations, but organizing. We believe that organizing is much bigger than organizations. And really it connects strategy on one side and what you do inside the company. Actually, there is no inside of the company. That's the idea of boundaryless. And I will try to explain a bit why. This journey doesn't start within the organization. In the last few years, 7 out of the top 10 companies for market capitalization have decided to take on a marketplace and an ecosystemic platform strategy. Think about eBay, think about Apple, think about Facebook, think about Google. In a sense, what they are doing is not selling a product or even a service. It's about empowering millions of others to do their own thing. Now, if you read the words of Martin Reeves, Martin is a partner at the BCG Anderson Institute. He says, we may think as ecosystems as an external appendage of the firm. In other words, you have something outside, you have something else inside. Who cares about the inside of the firm? We only care about profit, we only care about the experience. But guess what? We can't really have a two-sided marketplace. We cannot really be an ecosystem outside unless we change the inside of the firm. So what he's saying is that there is a strong, powerful connection between what you want to be in the market and who you are inside the firm. So if you think about Agile, I guess, where most of you come from, this is not about operations, it's not about delivery, it's about strategy, it's about existence, it's about the future, it's about what you want to achieve as an organization, as an individual within the organization with respect to the world. And I'll try to explain why. The first why comes from 1968. This guy was a programmer, Malcolm Way. Can I go ahead? Okay, without destroying anything. Cool. No? Okay. Mel was a programmer. So he looked at the relationships between the teams in complex software. And each software is made by modules. So by looking at the interfaces between the teams, he said that any system An organization that designs a system, so think about a product, again, think about an interface, will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization communication structure. What I mean with that, think about Spotify. I think everybody in this room knows about Spotify, their squads, their guilds, their tribes. Well, Spotify is organized that way only because the product is based on microservices. So only because the system they produce has modules that have interfaces, and those interfaces are really the interfaces between teams, between human beings. Think about the websites of public administration. Maybe you have tried sometime to look for a certificate or to look for an information. And when you look, you go on the site and you look at the information architecture, meaning the labels on the site, good luck. Because what you find is the same words, is the same language that you don't understand, because it's the exact structure of the internal side of the organization you don't care about. You just want a certificate. So what you see outside is really a reflex of the relationships inside the firm. So the first point, first takeaway is that you cannot be an ecosystem, you cannot be a platform, you cannot be successful in certain ways today unless you think about what you are inside. But there's another interesting aspect, and Roche Hasby, the father of cybernetics, told us about this. If a system is to be stable, so if you can control a system, the number of states of its control mechanism must be greater than or equal to the number of states of the system being controlled. When you think about states today, we can talk about richness, we can talk about information, we can talk about different configuration, or we can talk about complexity in a bit more modern way. And what Ross is saying is that if we want to have the complexity that we see in a market in which you have millions of players, there are at the same time buyers and suppliers. So if we want to have this richness, well, we need to have at least the same richness, the same complexity inside the firm. Connecting the two, if you want to act as a platform, you have to be a platform. If you want to tap into an ecosystem, you have to be an ecosystem. You need to have the same variety because variety wins over variety. That's the second law. And there are many examples of this, examples that you know very well. So if you look at what Apple and what Amazon have been doing, there are two very successful examples of digital companies, but two very different examples. The first one, Apple, is an example of betting on a single, very controlled product. Basically, they have been controlling everything. Closed product, they have been betting partnerships, they have been controlling who could do what, and internally, they had a structure aligned to that because they had only one profit and loss, they had only one siloed vertical chain of command, they had a traditional organization made by functions. On the other side, you have Amazon. Amazon has been doing quite the opposite. They have been betting on many products. Think about AWS. It's not selling books. It's selling storage. It's selling computing power. It's a different business, an important business. And they have many businesses like that. What they have been doing is organizing for different products, different markets, and at the same time, they have allowed lots of freedom inside. Different divisions with their own profit and loss. They could spend money, they could gain money, and all of these products were modular. So in a sense, freedom inside to get freedom outside. So there is a strong connection between strategy, what you want to be and achieve in the market, and how you are organized internally. And if we take a bit of numbers, a bit of figures from the market, we see some trends depicting a perfect storm. We know from Gallup that only 15% of employees are engaged today. We know from InnoSci that most of the Standard & Poor's 500 is disappearing because large companies are too slow to reinvent themselves at the speed the market is asking them to do. And if we look at Deloitte data, we see that the return on assets, so a key indicator of the value that the company gives back to investors, has been falling down for 45 years in the entire market to 1/4 of what it was in 1965. And finally, from humanocracy, we see that the cost of organizational bureaucracy, the time to take decisions, the number of players that are involved in making any decision, even if you have to spend $100, cost us something like $9 trillion. That's a lot of money. So all these trends have been pushing the first takeaway I would like to give you, the unbundling of the firm. So instead of having huge monolithic companies with 350,000, 400,000 people, we start to see not just agile teams, we start to see a sort of ecosystem of small, multidisciplinary, semi-autonomous teams with the goal of doing their own thing, with the goal, with the responsibility of achieving something in the market. Freedom and responsibility to achieve something extraordinary. That's the first step. So we stop seeing huge behemoths and we start to see a sort of flooding of small teams with lots of power. And this is happening everywhere. It's happening really everywhere in every industry. There are examples such as this one from Bureaucracy in the no-profit space. Bureaucracy is a company of 14,000 nurses. They're not doing software. They're caring about patients at home. And Joste Block, the founder and nurse, came up with this idea of a firm without any manager, quite without any central structure, with 1,000 independent teams in which nurses look for patients, treat them, train themselves, and take decisions without any manager, without any centralized support. But that's not the only example. If you go to the other side of the pond in the United States, Morningstar has been for a long time an example of not even distributed teams, but individuals contracting services among themselves within the same organization for transforming tomato. They are the largest company in this regard, and they have a network of self-empowered, self-managed professionals doing this. So you see, the monolith becomes a sort of network of individuals, a network of teams with the same joy that you have embraced this morning, the same possibility to laugh, to make decisions, to make mistakes, to come up with something new without any hoverhead, without any manager, without any vice president, without any president controlling you and telling you what you have to do in your own job when you are the one talking with customers. That's the first important point. But that's not the only point. Many years ago, this guy, Jeff Bezos, added another step into this picture of transformation of organizations. On one side, you unbundle the organization. You create these Lego bricks, these components. But on the other side, he said, teams must communicate with each other. You can do it whatever you want. You can pick Corba, HTTP, any protocol you want. It doesn't matter. But your team must have an interface, a standard interface, an API, we could say, with other teams. And you must do that at the very beginning, thinking that the interface could be exposed to the outside world, thinking that your AWS can be interesting to the rest of the world. So it's about fragmenting the firm, unbundling the firm, and then thinking about how to let the firm rebundle itself without any hierarchy, but to look after customer needs. So it's like making these teams no longer teams, but small companies that should read the market and respond to the market by coming together dynamically. So think about those managers you have. Well, maybe you don't need them. And maybe if you are a manager, That's something to start pondering. And he closed, anyone who doesn't do that would be fired. Typical style, right? That's a bit of a joke, but still it's very important to see these two trends. And if you look at the same examples, well, if you look at what Bureaucracy has been doing, they've been using software to let the teams talk with other teams. So they have a sort of an intranet called the Bureaucracy Web, through which Jos de Blok, this guy, the founder, does problem solving, does communication, does alignment, does knowledge sharing, and creates and shares the culture of the company with teams that are geographically distributed. So they never meet each other. They talk through technology. And if you look at what Morningstar did, it's the same. Those contracts of collaboration between individuals that they call colleagues' letter of understanding agreements are stored in the software. So you can go in the software, you can see the promises, the expectations that everybody in the organization has. All of that is not hidden. It's not, managed. It's just happening dynamically through the interactions of people, and it's stored transparently in the organization. And actually, this trend is common. You can see it in most of these organizations. And these two are just some of the cases. So what has been happening for the last 40 years is that we have been seeing an increasing number of small organizations, such as Valve, that you may know, or Buffer, medium organizations such as Spotify, Zappos, or very large organizations. Higher, we'll talk a lot about them, but W. L. Gore, Whole Foods, in any industry, even in regulated markets. So you think, oh, I'm in insurance, oh, I'm in pharma, or I'm in banking. Yeah, ING has been doing that. Handelsbanken is probably the best example of a bank that is distributed and that has been beating the market for 47 years in a row. So you see, everywhere this is happening, everywhere we start to see patterns of unbundling the firm and sometimes, not always, rebundling the firm around customer needs. And with the words of Dave Snowden, we could say that right now the game is not defining a model. It's not deciding if you want to have the Spotify model, if you want to have the higher model. It's really to find contextually unique solutions. So your organization will be different, for sure. You can take inspiration, you can take ingredients, but the recipe is yours. Contextually unique solutions to emerge from the organization and adapt to do the unbundling. But that's the second part, based on a coherent whole. And this is the most difficult question. How can you balance the freedom, the autonomy, the responsibility of each team, if each team acts as a company, as a firm, with a bit of consistency? Because at the end, you are still a company. So maybe you have a brand, so maybe you have a budget, so maybe you have a CEO and a board. How to make all of that without any hierarchy? To me, that's the question. It's very easy to have an agile team. It's very difficult to have a business agility, to have an agile company with 50,000 people not doing IT and development, but doing whatever. It could be legal, it could be compliance, it could be production. How can you do that? Well, that's exactly what Hire did. So Hire has been able for 40 years to find and evolve an answer to this question that I believe is the question that everybody has in Agile, but not only in Agile. So let's briefly tell the story of Hire. Well, Hire started in a very, very bad position. You know, this is China. It's not United States. It's not Europe. It's not software. They were selling fridges. And guess what? Those fridges were not working. So they were not working, and to be sincere, in China at that point, that was fine. Customers were buying not working fridges, bringing them back and repairing them. That was the market. But in 1982, this guy, Jiang Zemin, invited all of his colleagues in the hall, brought 76 fridges, refrigerators in the hall, and gave them hammers and asked them to smash the fridges. Now, each refrigerator had a cost of 2 years of Chinese salary at that point. So it was lots of money. And 20% of those devices were not working. So he asked them to smash the fridges to give a message, to say, if we don't do this now, if we don't change our mindset, our approach now, it will be the market to destroy us. That was the beginning of a real revolution, not only in Haier, but actually in China, that in 1986 brought them back to profitability, and 1992 created Haier. Haier today is the global leader of white goods, and they started to acquire their competitors in the US, General Electric appliances that wanted to acquire them before. They acquired Haier, Candy Hoover in Europe, and other companies in Asia to become the global leader of white good appliances. And they did that through the RenDanHeYi. And unfortunately, I cannot pronounce the name properly myself because it's so difficult, and the name is something that they came up with. But RenDanHeYi means connecting every employee with every customer to generate and share value together. In a sense, today the topic of the conference is going from hierarchies to ecosystems. Well, Haier is an ecosystem. I'm part of Haier, even if I'm not part of Haier. I'm not an employee. I have no supervision from Haier, but we have an ecosystem micro-community with Haier, and I will explain that in a moment. In these 40 years, actually, they went through many transformations. It took them decades to get what they have. Transformations at the business model level, transformation at the strategy level, and transformation at the organizational level. And again, that's an example of what I was describing before. There's no way you can be different in the market if you don't dare to be different inside. The transformation at the business model level has been what they call reducing the zero distance, reducing the distance between customers and employees to zero. For them, there is really no distance. Each team is responsible for customer outcomes and actually is paid. So their salary, this is real, their salary at the end of the month is paid by the results they create with customers. It's not paid by the company. It's not paid by a manager. It's not paid by Haier. It's paid by themselves and the customers. And the strategy has been not selling the best products, not fighting on pricing, but creating unique user scenarios. And if you think about that, after 40 years, maybe it looks a bit obvious, but 40 years ago, that wasn't obvious. So they went through these transformations. Initially, traditional company, command and control. Then they looked at the classic matrix organization. And then they started to give power, autonomy, freedom to the edges of the firm. First of all, with the business units, then reversing the hierarchy, putting customers at the center and customer-facing team at the head of the organization, and eventually becoming an entrepreneurial and ecosystemic organization. And this is where the RenDanHeYi kicked in. So we will focus only on that today. Why this is important? Because if you look at these 5 points, even not knowing about the RenDanHeYi, I'm sure you can find something relevant for you. Being driven by customer needs and results. Who doesn't want to be? Being inspired by market dynamics, so being more agile, reducing the bureaucracy, having a bit of internal competition as well. Being continually adaptive. Unlocking entrepreneurship, what you did before, in a sense. So letting employees take decisions, difficult decisions, and reap the benefits of those decisions. And doing the same with teams. These are universal trends. I think if you ask 95% of the market, they would say yes, 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 yes. The question is how you do that. I think everybody agrees with this, but didn't see many companies actually doing it and doing it successfully for more than 40 years. So that's my interest, not copying Agile, but looking at what they did, why they did it, and getting inspiration from what they learned from it. And that's exactly the RenDanHeYi. So the RenDanHeYi can be thought at 3 levels. The first level is having an entrepreneurial organization, believing that every individual, with the words of Jean Grumin, could be his or her own CEO. Not just as a statement, an empty statement, but really making every individual an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur means owning part of the company, means owning part of the profit sharing, means making difficult decisions, spending money without any authorization, risking, having upsides into that. Agile believes in unlocking human potential, and that's exactly what they do. That's exactly the people they look for. The second level is being ecosystemic. Competition is good, but competition is not enough. So as we'll see, Agile did the unbundling, but then created ways for independent teams to come back together in creating value for customers, but also in sharing value that they created. So it's not about me, it's always about us. And the us is not within the company, the us is often the market, the partners, the suppliers, the customers, university. So it's really an ecosystem that goes well beyond the organization. And the third point is that when we talk about self-management, about agility, we often think that everything can be distributed. Agile demonstrates the opposite. You have a choice. You can have everything distributed that rarely scales, to be sincere, or you can have the right mix of centralization and decentralization. So Agile knows that some things shouldn't be distributed if you still want to have a bit of coherence. This Norton will talk about messy coherence, a loosely coupled coherence. Think about branding. Do you want to have 4,000 brands, or do you want to have something a bit more controlled? Do you want to have a common HR function or not? Do you want to have the same incentivization scheme or not? It's your call, but Agile recognizes that you may have control also on this, on what you want to decentralize because there is more value in that, and what you want to centralize because you want to have scalability. And they have 80,000 people, so they need a bit of scalability. So these are the 3 ingredients of what we call the 3O, the entrepreneurial ecosystem enabling organization. And to be sincere, this is not new. In the last 40 years, if we pick those examples, well, Kyocera has been doing entrepreneurial teams with amoeba management in 1959. 1959, a few days ago, right? And Valve, Whole Foods, and many others. Some of them have been thinking systemically, Amazon through APIs, Spotify, microservices. And many of them have been using technology to support this. So in a sense, this is not new. Agile just put everything back together with much more speed, with much more scalability, and more successfully getting rid of bureaucracy and management. So in a nutshell, how does it work? 3 concepts. And of course, there is much more, but in a nutshell, everything in Agile is a micro enterprise, not a team. It's a small company. Small company means a company. So they can make decisions, they can spend money, they have a distinct profit and loss, they create their own product, they have their product strategy, they are responsible for delivering. Okay? The second concept is that it's good to have autonomous teams, but you need also to let them collaborate. The collaboration is called the ecosystem micro community. It's not a unit. It's not an organization structure. It's a contract. Especially, it's a smart contract into a blockchain. But okay, it goes beyond that. It's a contract. It means that 3 or 30 or 300 teams, microenterprises, will voluntarily get into a contract to support a complex user scenario, something that they cannot address in isolation. That's the EMC. And the interesting part is that the EMC can only fail or succeed entirely. So if one node of the microenterprise doesn't deliver, one node of the EMC doesn't deliver, the EMC doesn't deliver, meaning nobody gets profit sharing. So they are really a community because they want to succeed all together, and then they want to succeed, of course, for the customers. The third point is that not everything gets decentralized. Platforms are the centralized part. And there are two types of platforms. The first one is shared service platforms. Think about IT, legal, HR. Well, these guys feel the same pressure for the market, meaning that if I'm not happy with my HR colleagues, I can go and buy the services from the market. So next year, they won't have a job. So they need to deliver for the money they ask. So they have the same entrepreneurship that we ask everybody else to have, but even HR gets distributed, gets fragmented in many small teams, okay? The second point, the second type of platform is industry platforms. Industry platforms are a way to decentralize strategy. So you still have a common strategy, but the strategy becomes a number of big bets, an industry platform. An industry platform is something like the Internet of Food, the smart home, let's say some big directions on which the company overall wants to invest. The company puts money on the table, doesn't tell people what to do, puts money on the table and say, okay, I have 1 billion. Who wants a piece of it to build a new product, to build a new experience? And that's the nudging of the company on strategy. You can just ignore it if you want. You can build a product without any investment, but if you want to have an investment, you have to do that within these industry platforms. They're not bosses. They're just nudging systems, let's say, to guarantee this messy coherence. So you have actually quite lots of chaos, but also a bit of direction. Just to add a bit of flavor on this briefly, the microenterprises have the responsibility of understanding the market, of finding opportunities, of reducing organizational and technological debt, and delivering on it. They are paid by customers. It means they keep a part of the profit that they generate. It remains within the microenterprise, so you can get rich if you are successful. And eventually, team members can own the microenterprise. So they are no longer entrepreneurs. They are no longer employees. They become entrepreneurs. An example of this is Thunder Robot. This was the first microenterprise. It's about creating a gaming laptop. Hire at that point didn't do anything about laptops. They had nothing about laptops. So these three guys were gamers, and they said, why not doing it? They just got the idea, iterated the ideas 6 times in 15 months. They didn't have the manufacturing ability. They externalized that. They got pre-orders from the market. They worked with customers, and they got support from these shared service platforms, HR, finance, marketing, Q&A, and so on. And they eventually went IPO, and they attracted also other capitals, rounds of capital. Today, they are co-owners of the microenterprise with Hire, and they have 125 employees. That's an example of a team that becomes a company that could become a unicorn very quickly in Hire terms. The ecosystemic, the EMC, is this possibility of microenterprises to come together. So we have market dynamics, competition, but we also have collaboration dynamics without any control, without any hierarchy. It's microenterprises, it's their role to sense the market, see something they cannot address in isolation, and raise their hand and say, can I have help in a software? So they post basically a request, an order, as they call it, into the software, and anybody in the firm or outside can bid on that order. So everybody can candidate and say, I have this capability, I will do that in exchange of something. And then there is a negotiation of that. All of that is dynamic, all of that is transparent, and all of that brings value to all the parties into the EMC. So the EMC is a peer-to-peer agreement to create something new for the market. An example of an EMC is the Smart Cooking EMC. This guy, Zhang Yu, was having a nice dinner at New Year's Eve, and I don't know if you ever tried the Peking duck. The Peking duck is a traditional dish, but something you cannot cook at home. Said, why not letting our customers do that at home? We have ovens, right? So he went looking for farms. He went looking for chefs. He went looking for distribution system. He went looking for people installing ovens. He built an ecosystem through which they were able to deliver Peking ducks at home by pressing one button. Copying a refrigerator or an oven, it's easy. Copying that, it's very, very difficult. And they delivered their results with 11 innovation nodes before their target, and they replicated that on another 16 dishes. That's an EMC, all together sharing value. And the last part, it's the enabling. The enabling is how you can transform traditional support functions into something that is entrepreneurial. And to be sincere, this is the most difficult part, where most companies don't even try. Because go asking HR, IT, to look at the market, to react to the market, But that's what hire is doing, is decomposing those functions in entrepreneurial teams and letting them compete with the market. I'm not happy with the app that my IT team delivered. I'm sorry, I'm buying it from the market. I'm not happy for the recruiting I got from HR. I'm sorry, I'm buying it from the market. And it's the enabling part that gives a bit of coherence to the system. So, of course, this is a trade-off. The more coherence you want, the more bureaucracy you will have. So you can even have a traditional organization with the RenDanHeYi, but of course that's not really in the spirit of the thing. So at the end, what hire did is having a scalable system with 80,000 people that they are now replicating in the US, they are now replicating all over Europe, and there are now something like 625,000 companies looking at what hire is doing. All the business schools are writing cases about this, trying to understand how to get the inspiration, not to copy hire, but to get these ideas of unbundling and rebundling, of profit sharing, of reducing distance from customers, of having the agility scale up to the top of the organization and becoming the leader, of course. Right now, they have 4,000 microenterprises, 700 EMCs, 400 industry platforms, but all of this is in flux. So probably today this is already hold. But the idea really, I think, stays and gives us a nudge towards what the world is becoming. And this is really my last slide. If you have looked at the title, Collapsing Empires and Thriving Rainforest, I think that in the last 100 and something years, we have built very strong empires. Most of our companies, I know there are some big companies into this, but even startups, after 35 people, 50 people are going in that direction. That's surprising. Building functions, the CEO, the board, the director, the manager. That's a way to pretend that you can forecast, you can predict the future and optimize for a future that maybe won't ever materialize. Think about COVID. Think about the Ukraine. Nobody could know that. So we optimized for something that never happened, and we were not able to be adaptive, not only agile, in respect of what really happened. And Hire took inspiration, John Grumman took inspiration from both Western and Eastern philosophy, Taoism especially. And what they say is that, well, every empire will eventually fail, will eventually collapse. Doesn't matter if you are Kodak, or if you are a Blockbuster, or if you have any company, at some point, if you are a monolith, there will be a startup that will just put you out of the market. On the other side, a rainforest, this ecosystem of micro enterprises competing, failing, building new things in a bit of chaos, may survive forever, can be sustained forever. So let's build more rainforest and a bit less empires. Thank you so much.